right now. So I think we can probably go ahead and get started. Savannah, do you want to go ahead and start recording? So as I said, good morning, everyone. This is the April monthly webinar for CECCs. If you join us for some of the few in the past, we have been discussing a lot of stuff that, a lot of the initiatives that we're taking on here at the Governor's Office of Early Childhood. I have my camera on today just because it helps me get dressed in the morning to know that we'll be seeing. So thanks everybody for joining us today. We are going to be talking with Amy Swann, the research director at Kentucky Youth Advocates, about the 2020 census and how important it is that we get our families in the state of Kentucky to fill that out before the end of the year. So as I said, we are going to be speaking with Amy Swann. I do want to just say a couple of things about the work that you guys have been doing over the course of the last few weeks with your grant applications. We did receive several of those on Friday, and we're in the process right now of getting those reviews out. We're hoping to get everybody's notices of awards out early next week, but thank you so much for all your hard work and dedication over the course of the last 2 months to get those applications in, especially in the light of the COVID-19 crisis. You know, I know that it was a lot of work, especially with folks working from home and trying to get those collaborative regional pieces together. So I really appreciate all of your hard work and dedication in doing that. So we are, as I said, we're going to be talking the 2020 census with Amy Swann. We will have a few minutes at the end to have questions and answers for Amy. So as usual, if you do have questions throughout the chat, go ahead and put it, or throughout the presentation, go ahead and put those questions in the chat box, and I will read through those at the end of the presentation. And then we're going to talk next steps. I'm hoping to have a great webinar next month that I think that I might be able to by the end of this, but we'll be talking about next steps then. So as always, we like to remember as we're going through this, I believe that we're going through the 5th week of our Healthy at Home business these days, and slowly getting back to the healthy at work. But as Governor Beshear says every afternoon at 5, we will get through this, and we will get through this together. And again, with all of the work that you guys do, that is one of the most important things, is making sure that we all are together as we're moving through this crisis. I just wanted to, again, briefly talk about how Kentucky's response is working and flattening that curve. And these are the 10 steps to fight COVID-19. I think most everybody has seen these several times over the course of the last month or so, and I'm not going to go through all of them. But you know, the staying healthy at home, and now we're moving more towards the healthy at work as things are starting to reopen. Want to make sure that we're practicing that social distancing, even as a lot of you guys are doing some of your feeding programs and helping out with NTI. I know that that has been a great stress on all of you. And so making sure that we do that is really important. The COVID-19, the kycovid19.ky.gov is the website. It does have the most up-to-date, and they are updating that daily with any new information that we get during those press conferences every afternoon. And then, you know, as always, wash your hands, all of that stuff. We just need to make sure that we're all on the same page as we move forward with the COVID-19 crisis. Also, as the governor says every day during his press conferences, is that there is a +1, which is filling out your census, which is why we felt it was really important to have this conversation with Kentucky Youth Advocates today, so that you guys could help Kentuckians help themselves as we are getting through this census process with the COVID-19. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Amy Swann. Again, she is the research director for Kentucky Youth Advocates, and she has a lot of information and will be sending us a lot of resources in the next few days with that. Amy?
Thanks, Amanda. You can hear me okay?
We sure can.
Okay, great. So yeah, thank you so much for this opportunity. I I did a short presentation a while back to the Governor's Office of Early Childhood, and KYA has been engaged in a lot of work over really the past 2+ years now on the 2020 census. But I'm here today to really talk about how you all can help, get out the count and prevent this undercount of children that I'm going to talk about. As she said, I'm the research director at Kentucky Youth Advocates. If you are familiar with the Kentucky Kids Count Project, then you've seen some of my handiwork. The census has become a passion project of mine over the past couple of years, and luckily we've received some funding for our work on it. And so my goal today, as the title of the presentation says, is to speak with you all about this undercount that has historically occurred of children and how we can avoid what is really a 10-year mistake from happening again. Next slide. So first, I just wanted to quickly share some kind of background information about the census to make sure we all, have same understanding of what it is and why it's important. The 2020 census is actually mandated in our U.S. Constitution. So it says that we have to count every resident, not just citizens of our nation, every 10 years, and it's been going on since 1790. It determines how many representatives each state gets in Congress. Kentucky actually lost a seat in the U.S. House of Representatives as a result of the 1990 census results. It's used to draw congressional and state legislative districts to account for population shifts. And I want to quickly say to that there's a lot of misunderstanding out there about the Census Bureau's role in redistricting. And I just want to point out that the Census Bureau collects and synthesizes the data and provides that to the president, Congress, each state. But the Census Bureau itself does not do the redistricting. It is up to the leaders in each state to do that. And then stacks and stacks and stacks of money. So there are more than 300 federal programs that rely on data that's derived from the census to determine funding. And it's actually $1.5 trillion in federal funds to states, counties, towns, school districts that is based on census data. So these are four major important ways in which the census is used, but there are other ways as well. So census data is used for things like planning roads, schools, hospitals, senior centers, emergency services. Businesses use it to decide where to locate factories and stores, and for market research and employee recruitment. And specific to children, I like to use the example of how it's used for planning, and that is with schools. And when you think about it, a kindergartner missed in the decennial census will be in high school by the time the next census is done. And so this has the very real potential to contribute to some overcrowded schools and some under-resourced schools. Next slide. So it's really hard to put a price tag on exactly how much those 300 plus federal programs, how much money those send to Kentucky. But there are these great researchers at George Washington State University who have looked at 55 of those 300 and come up with the figure for Kentucky. And so as this slide shows, that for those 55, Kentucky in just 1 year, so this is for fiscal year 2016, received $15.8 billion. And that was, again, guided by data derived from the last decennial census, the 2010 census. And so we're talking about some really big numbers here. I wanted to point out, relevant to the early childhood sector, just some of the programs that are in that 300 plus. And so that's things like the CCDBG grants, which help provide funding for our CCAP, our subsidized child care program, things like Head Start, the child and adult care food program that a lot of centers use in order to feed the children in their care during the day. And so when we go to the next slide, we're going to see a number that is specific to spending on children in Kentucky. The Annie Casey Foundation put this together for us a few years ago. And so again, this is just looking at a snapshot, just 10 large programs of those 300 plus. But this shows that for just 1 year, this is fiscal year 2015, Kentucky received $2.7 billion for things like the amount of Medicaid spent on children, also the CHIP program. You see Head Start and early Head Start there. You see child care, again, that CCDBG grant, and things like special education grants for school districts, Title I grants, and national school lunch programs, not to mention food stamps and WIC. I just wanted to quickly say before we advance to the next slide, it looks like the, the PowerPoint's on a timer or something, that as we all know, Kentucky is a very poor state. We have, about 1 in every 5 children living in poverty. It wouldn't surprise me in the least if once the numbers are collected and released, which will take a while, if we see that inch back to where it's been in the past, which is closer to 1 in every 4 due to the crisis that we're experiencing right now. We know a lot of parents have lost jobs, and it's not going to be easy for them to quickly get those back, even once things reopen. So what we say at KYA is that Kentucky literally can't afford to leave any money on the table. So if these are funds that we are due, then let's make sure that we're getting all the funds that we're due. And the only way to guarantee that is by making sure that the data is accurate, and that means counting everyone in the census. Next slide. So this is just to demonstrate. I'm not gonna ask you to read all these tiny numbers, but here's what this is demonstrating. And the chart on the left, the yellow arrow is showing that it is our youngest children, ages 0 to 4, that are most undercounted in the decennial census. It is children ages 5 to 9 who are second most undercounted. And the chart on the right is showing that this young child undercount has just been getting worse every census since the 1980 census. So given the billions of dollars that are on the table, and for such vital programs for early childhood development, we want to reverse this trend. And so the Annie Casey Foundation really brought this to our attention in late 2017. And ever since then, we've been kind of evangelizing across the state to anyone who will listen, about this problem, brainstorming ways to turn the tide and make sure that we count all children, especially our youngest children, since they're at highest risk of being undercounted. And next slide. And so this is a figure that some researchers put together for us that shows just what Kentucky lost out on due to our past undercount. So the latest and best estimate of how many young children were missed in Kentucky last time in the 2010 census is 12,568. And then they did a calculation. There are these programs that use what's called an SMAP allocation in their funding. And so for just 5 of those programs, which because of the funding allocation, it's easy to determine a per person expenditure. So it's Medicaid, CHIP, foster care, adoption assistance, and a portion of the child care block grant. So for just those 5 programs, because we missed out on 12,568 kids, Kentucky missed out on $12.2 million every year for those 5 programs. So again, we know that we're leaving big amounts of money on the table, and we want to talk about how we can prevent that. Next slide. So there are a lot of reasons why children are missed, and that's the million-dollar question. Every time I present, people say, "Well, you know, what's going on there? I mean, why in the heck are so many young children being missed? Why are people leaving them off the forms?" And there is no one answer. There are a lot of answers, as you can see. So there are child and family factors. Research has shown, you know, that newborns are very likely to be left off. There have been focus groups done with parents, and you know, some parents just have this conception that a census only needs to know about folks that are old enough to, you know, be, you know, getting services from schools, for example. And so they think, oh, well, this is just a little baby. They don't need to know about this little baby yet. There are children who are adopted or are in foster care or kinship care are much more likely to be left off. Again, there's just a lot of confusion out there about, oh, well, you know, should I count the child if they're not biologically mine? Young parents, single parents, recent immigrants or foreign born, limited English proficiency, all of those are demographic groups that are more likely to leave children off the form. Split custody, there's a lot of confusion among divorced, separated parents about whether which parent should count them. And just so you know, what the Census Bureau says is that where a child lives the majority of the year is where they should be counted. If, however, custody is truly split 50-50 down the line, then it's who was the child living with on Census Day, which is April 1st. Household factors, there's been research done that households that have had a recent move live in rental housing as opposed to owning a home, are low income, or have multi-generational or multifamily households are more likely to be missed. I want to back up before I go further and say that one thing that we are particularly mindful of at Kentucky Youth Advocates is the extremely high proportion Kentucky has of children being raised in kinship care. And most of that kinship care in Kentucky is grandparents raising grandchildren. Kentucky actually has the highest rate in the nation of children being raised by kin. And what the research has shown in focus groups, again, is that a lot of grandparents, not only is there that just regular confusion about, you know, oh, well, should I really count them? Because I think this is probably a temporary situation. But a lot of times there's also there's a fear about counting them. And so if a grandparent is living in, say, you know, senior housing where you're not supposed to have children, they may be afraid that somehow the information is going to be shared with the, you know, the landlord, or if they're in public housing, the housing authority, about people that aren't supposed to be living there being there. And so we really need to stress to people to kind of combat those myths and misunderstandings and tell people, look, the Census Bureau is not able to share this information with any other parties. There's been some newer research done on community level factors. And so places that have a high share of racial ethnic minorities, that have a high share of households that are linguistically isolated. Again, children living with grandparents and children living with non-relatives or in group quarters. Children are more likely to be missed in those areas. We know that we have a record number of children in foster care in Kentucky. And so that last bullet is particularly at the top of our mind. And while the data is not available at the state level, national level data show that among young children, that young children of color were more likely to be missed in the last census than their white peers. So that is something that we're trying to correct as we do this work. And I just want to point out here, because there is talk on this slide about immigrants and foreign-born parents, that what we know from data is that most kids who live in immigrant families, the kids themselves are US citizens, but one or both of the parents may not be. And so it's really important to remember that even if the parents may not be eligible for certain public benefits because of their status, that a lot of times their children are. But again, if the parents are leaving the children off because of fear of how the information may be adversely used against them by by ICE for deportation or something like that, then what's really happening is it's hurting the children, because again, we're not going to get as much funding as we need to serve all of these citizen children. Next slide. Okay, so let's shift and let's start talking about what we can do. That was a lot of information, and I have a lot more than that, but in the interest of time, I wanted to shift gears and start talking about how we hope you all will engage on the 2020 census. And so we need more people to be out there educating their family, friends, neighbors, clients, coworkers, the families they serve on the benefits to communities of having a full and accurate count. We need them dispelling that misinformation and assuaging those fears. Like I said, not only is the Census Bureau not allowed to share someone's individual data with any other government agency, let alone the private sector, but every employee of the Census Bureau actually takes a lifetime oath. So it applies to them even after they leave the Census Bureau, that they will not release any of that confidential information. And if they violate that oath, people don't realize that they face a really steep punishment. They actually are subject to a prison term of 5 years and a fine of $250,000. And to my knowledge, the Census Bureau has never had to mete out that punishment because who wants to risk those consequences for sharing someone's confidential information? So there's a lot of anxiety though out there, especially among our immigrant and refugee communities, and a lot of that was exacerbated by the federal administration's attempt to add a question about citizenship to the census. And a lot of people don't realize that that's not happening. They just heard all the kerfuffle about it and didn't hear that the Supreme Court, struck that down and that it's not happening. So we even need to share, some basic FAQs with people that know that it's not happening. You don't have to worry about being asked whether you're a US citizen or not on the census. Time and time again, what all the research has shown is that the very best way to persuade someone to complete the census and to do it accurately is to engage someone they consider a trusted voice to be that messenger. And the Census Bureau will be the first to tell you that they know they're not that voice. They know that the federal government is no substitute for somebody that has a personal relationship with that family. And so there's been a lot of marketing research done, and what parents have said again and again is that some of the folks they trust the most and would listen to the most are folks like childcare providers and teachers. And so we really need folks like you who either are in that role or are connected to folks in those roles because of your work on your community early childhood council to help spread this word. And I want to quickly say about this trusted voices piece that there has been some expensive messaging research done about which specific messages help kind of move the needle on a parent's willingness to complete the census. And so I will send a, I don't want to send you all the whole full messy market research brief, but I will pull out and create kind of a very short summary document that I sent to Amanda to forward to you all that summarizes what those effective messages are. And so some of it's as simple as, you know, how we say something or a key detail that has been shown to really move the needle. For instance, in some marketing research that was done, they found that it helped increase a parent's confidence a lot more to specify that those Census Bureau workers could face up to 5 years in prison and a fine of $250,000 if they violate that oath, rather than just saying that they're bound by oath and would face consequences if they broke it. So there are just some things that we've learned along the way due to research that's been done that can make us even more effective in our work as trusted voices. I want to point out, I should have pointed this out at the very beginning, that the 2020 census is the first time in our nation's history that people can complete the census online. And in fact, the Census Bureau, if you've seen any of the millions of ads, banners, PSAs, etc., that they have been putting out, they are really pushing the online option. And there's an obvious reason for that. Obviously, the more people that fill it out online, ultimately, the cheaper it is for the Census Bureau, because then they have to, pay less people to open up mailed-in copies and, enter them. They have to pay less people to go across the town knocking on doors. But I am very cognizant that there are areas of Kentucky that don't have great internet, that, they may not have internet access in their home, especially with, so many things being closed down, libraries, other businesses that they may have difficulty, getting to an internet-enabled computer in the community right now. And so we do also need to be reminding everybody that there are still the traditional ways available to respond to the census, and that is by phone or by mail. I want to take a pause and let you guys know at this point that there are some major changes that have been made to the operational plan for the 2020 census because of the COVID pandemic. And so these are things just to keep in mind as you're doing this work, some kind of a timetable, so to speak, to keep front of mind. So originally the plan was to give people until the end of July to self-respond, to voluntarily, answer the 10 questions on the census form using online, phone, or mail. But because of the pandemic, they have pushed that deadline all the way back now to October 31st, Halloween. And there are various reasons behind that. Just one reason that I do want to share with you all, because again, you all represent, you know, every county in Kentucky. And so for some of you, um, this will ring true for your county. For 95% of households, um, the Census Bureau has been sending invitations and reminders about the census in the mail to them going back to March. But there are 5% of households that, for a variety of reasons, they don't get things in the mail from the Census Bureau. So communities, or census tracts, which are just small levels of geography in a community that are very geographically isolated, that have a high proportion of people using PO boxes instead of a regular mailing address, a regular street address, um, and or have very poor internet access. Those 5% of households don't get anything in the mail from the Census Bureau. How they are handled is that a Census Bureau employee is responsible for going to that physical home and dropping off the packet that contains the census form by hand. And that is something that was supposed to start happening earlier this month, but because of the pandemic, they obviously had to put that on hold. And so that's not going to start for a while. um, I hesitate to even share the date with you because I have a feeling it's gonna change again, because we're just living, day to day, dealing with so many unknowns. And so, because there's those 5% of households that haven't even formally been invited, they decided to push that self-response deadline all the way back to October 31st. So on the one hand, that's good news because we obviously do need more time to engage families because of what's happened. On the other hand, it's kind of a double-edged sword. The consequence to that is that the longer people wait to complete the form, what research has shown is the less accurate their data is. And a big part of that is because when the census asks you to complete the form for your household, they are asking you to use April 1st as your reference date for your answers. So they ask you to think about who was in your household on April 1st. Because again, people move, they understand that. But the census is supposed to be a snapshot of America's households on April 1st. Obviously, it's hard for people to remember in October who exactly was living in their house during April 1st. Although maybe it won't be as hard since we've all been kind of locked down. So so that's a couple things I wanted to update you all on because that self-response deadline has been pushed back to October 31st. The Census Bureau has had to ask Congress to change their most important deadlines, which is the date that they have to give the president the results for apportionment and the date that they have to give states the data for redistricting. So those aren't happening until well into 2020 now. So I want to specifically talk about a way that I'm hoping you all can engage during quarantine. So even though so many child care centers are closed, even though schools are, the school buildings are closed, even though most libraries are closed, there is some electronic outreach that we can be doing. And so if we go to the next slide, I want to talk a little bit about that. Amanda sent you a PDF yesterday that I put together. There are lots of organizations out there that have created content for electronic outreach. So please, take a minute to click on the hyperlinks in that PDF and check out some of this stuff. Some of it is just super, super cute. Obviously, anything put out by Sesame Street is going to be super cute. Nickelodeon has put out stuff that engages a variety of their show's characters. Dr. Seuss, I worked with Dr. Seuss to create some activity sheets. So what we can be doing right now when everything is closed is we can be talking about the census on social media. If you have email listservs, if you have e-newsletters, things like that. And some of this stuff, well, I'll say most of this stuff is very conducive to electronic outreach. Now, obviously, the activity sheets that Seussville created, those have to be printed out in order for kids to actually use them. So, you could share the link. I have a feeling a lot of households don't have printers at home, so that may be something that you wait and use when things start to reopen. Everything else on here has stuff that is ready-made, ready to use for electronic outreach. So everything from I just saw a little pop-up box when somebody I think made a chat comment about PSAs. Not only has the Census Bureau created a ton of PSAs, and a lot of them are geared specifically towards families with young children, and so I can provide links to those as a follow-up. But some of these organizations you see on the screen. So Sesame Street has created PSAs and a variety of links. Nickelodeon has done it. Statistics in Schools. I wanted to briefly describe what that is. That is actually a program of the Census Bureau. I make sure to tell people that the name is a real misnomer. I wish they hadn't called it Statistics in Schools, because it makes people think that it's just about statistics, and it's so much more. Basically, this is a program that they have created for educators to engage students on census in a variety of different ways. And so everything in the Statistics in Schools program was designed and vetted by teachers. I think that's really important, that this wasn't just some random Census Bureau employee that did this. The materials align with education standards. They not only have stuff for the elementary, middle, and high school grades, but they have a collection of resources specifically for pre-K. And so those are more so to, obviously to entertain, but also to educate young children in a way that connects them with the census. And so on that resource list, I've given you the hyperlink to that group of materials for pre-K, but there's also some things that they've done with that I think really lend themselves well to things like social media. They created this really cute short sing-along song about how everyone counts that has little kids singing. There's a video that goes with that. They've also created a 3-part, what they're calling a webisode series. I've looked at these, and they're each, I think, less than 2 minutes. So, don't think that we're talking about like a whole episode of TV here. Those are animated. Again, they're geared towards young children and their parents. And so I've given you the hyperlinks to those YouTube videos. And when things open back up, there are a lot of activities to do in child care centers, in preschools and Head Starts with children. There's a whole activity book. It's a storybook / activity book. And they've got a version on the website where you can easily print it out on 8.5 by 11 paper. So there's lots of good stuff there. That Statistics in Schools is an excellent resource. I have a couple coworkers at KYA who are former teachers, and they are actually working with me to convert some of these statistics in schools activities to be more parent friendly, so that you don't have to be a teacher to do this with your child at home during at home learning. So I will make sure to forward those to Amanda as those come out. And then I wanted to mention the Count All Kids initiative. That is a nationwide, I guess you would say, coalition of advocates for young children. So folks like 0 to 3, folks like the National Association for the Education of Young Children that you may be familiar with. This is something that Kentucky Youth Advocates is a member of as well. And basically it's a coalition highlighting, that our youngest children are our most undercounted, and providing resources to try to prevent that. And so on that resource sheet, I have given you all a hyperlink specifically to a what they're calling their social press kit. I do highly recommend, though, that you also just go to countallkids.org. They've got so much great information through their blog and whatnot. But at that social press kit, they have what I would call literally ready-made social media posts. So they've got text already written out with a specific graphic, and all you have to do is click on the button that says, link on my Facebook or link on my Twitter. And so they've got stuff like that. They have a messaging guide. Actually, I'll take a look at that and see if it's worth me adding anything or just promoting that one for your use. They've got posters, and again, they have some activity sheets that can be printed out. And I wanted to point out that everything that Sesame Street, Nickelodeon, and the Count All Kids Coalition has put out, all of these materials are available in both English and Spanish, which is wonderful. A lot of the statistics in schools, activities, and videos are also available in both English and Spanish. So please, take a look at that. I actually wanted to tell you about kind of a late-breaking social media event that I'm really hoping you all can collaborate with us on. It's this weekend, and so I apologize for the late notice, but I literally just got the details yesterday, and so I'm going to forward information to Amanda that I'm hoping she can email out after this webinar, because I got the details after I had already sent her my information. But National Babies Day is Saturday. I don't know who declared it National Babies Day, but hey, we'll take it. And so there is going to be a Facebook Live event around 4 p.m. Eastern Time on Saturday afternoon. When I say Facebook Live event, it's only a 10-minute long event. So this isn't asking you to be on the web for an hour or anything like that. But there is that, and we are using Friday afternoon. There's a specific time of day, I can't remember off my head, that they're encouraging everyone to kind of engage in a tweet storm if you're on Twitter to promote that Facebook Live event. There is an entire toolkit that I received yesterday afternoon to facilitate the tweet storm and the Facebook Live promo, and so I will forward that information to Amanda. And I know that 0 to 3, which is a national organization I imagine some of you are familiar with. I know that they are a partner in this. I can't remember who all else, but it's a great opportunity to start getting involved in this electronic promotion and outreach if you haven't already. Let's see, and I think I'm gonna end it there, with the caveat before we open for questions that again, I could talk about this all day, but I want to be respectful of time and leave plenty of time for questions. And so if there is an aspect of the census that I have not covered, if you go to the next slide, you will see my contact information. Um, Please do not hesitate to reach out to me. I love working with people on the census and giving them the resources that they need to get involved. For all I know, some of you may be involved in your community's what they call complete count committee, um, that's charged with, figuring out ways to make sure everyone in your county gets counted. Maybe you work for a local school district that's been, sending reminders to parents. I know that lots of people across the state have been doing lots of good work. And as Amanda said, our governor has been doing a great job of making the census his 11th step, and doing a great job on social media of promoting everyone getting counted. But I will stop there, and open it up for questions. I saw that there were lots of chats kind of popping up as I was talking, so I'll leave it to Amanda to kind of organize those for us.
Thank you so much, Amy, for that great information. A lot of what we've seen in the chat box has been thank you so much. I think that a lot of folks on the call are very excited to start putting some of this work into their local communities. So I did, there were several documents that were discussed that Amy is going to send to me. As I get those in, of course, I'll forward them to you guys. We are recording this webinar, so it will be, as soon as it gets rendered, we will get it up onto our YouTube site for you guys to send out or any of that kind of stuff. I did have one question, Amy. So a lot of folks, I think, are interested in the resources that you have been talking about. And if I recall correctly, the activity books that you mentioned, you guys have there at KYA. It looks like a lot of folks are interested in getting those. Can we just send the information over to you, or is there someone else to get those books out to the communities?
Good question. So here's what we do and we don't have and how we're using it. And so the activity sheets created by Seussville, the activity sheets you'll find on the link I provided for the Count on Kids Coalition, the story/activity book created by the Census Bureau through their Statistics in Schools program. We have not printed those out to provide. That is something, though, that we're considering doing with some of the grant funding that we've received. However, we put that idea on hold when everything kind of locked down. We're switching some of our grant funding over to a digital ad campaign. What we do have at our office, there's a storybook for young children called We Count, put out by a nonprofit publisher that worked with the Census Bureau on it. And we have ordered those specifically for a handful of counties in eastern Kentucky that have historically had the lowest self-response rates, and which the data shows are behind in self-responding right now compared to other counties. So there are a number of school districts that we have sent those to in eastern Kentucky, where they are handing them out at like their school meal pickup sites. They're asking families, do you have a young child at home? If so, here's this book and a flyer that explains it. So we very well may be able to provide some of the books that we have left over to some folks that are interested in it. I want to give a little bit more time to some of the schools we've been trying to reach, but have had a hard time reaching in that high priority area of eastern Kentucky, just because we know that that is where the greatest need for outreach is. But yeah, if you want to provide me folks who are interested in that, I would be happy to put them on kind of a a waiting list, like I said, where if we still have books to give out, yeah, we definitely, they're not doing any good sitting in our office, so we definitely do want to get them out in the community.
Absolutely. So if you are interested in getting access to those activity books, just shoot me an email, and I will work with Amy on the best way to get any of those out to you guys as needed. So we do have a question. Will there be any simple summaries that
So I'm not sure what exactly you mean by simple summaries. There are like if you click on the very last hyperlink in the PDF that Amanda sent out, the hyperlink to the social press kit for the Count All Kids campaign. That's a great resource because, like I said, they have these ready-made social posts. So they've got text, whether you use it for social media or you use it for like a text messaging campaign or in, emails or whatever. But so, those are well thought out, short burst of text. They also have that messaging guide there. So let me relook at those and think if there's something supplemental that maybe the question asker, would benefit from. But I think that you would find, I think if I understand the question correctly, I think you would probably find what you're referencing at that Count All Kids hyperlink.
And I also think, Amy, as we were kind of working together to get this webinar together, if I recall correctly, you mentioned that KYA itself has a rather large social media presence where they've been blasting out a lot of these things. So if your CECC has a Facebook page, or if you want to follow Kentucky Youth Advocates, you'll start to see a lot of those campaigns where you can share and like that information so that information will continue.
Yeah, I tell folks, if you don't have, the time or the manpower to craft your own, social media content, using the resources I've provided, you know, the next best thing is just to follow KYA. We're on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, and we are constantly posting about the census. And so we're making it very easy, yeah, for folks to like, share, retweet, whatever you want to call it. I will make sure to send those social media handles to Amanda in the follow-up information.
And we'll send that out with the emails. We may send out several, it sounds like, with some of the information that we've discussed today. And like I said, there is quite a bit of interest in our chat box about this. So we will continue this conversation in the coming weeks and months as much as we can. Activity books can be added to NTI packets if you guys can get them soon. Let's talk about that a little bit. I do think that there are a lot of organizations out there that are distributing the NTI packets, which, putting one of the flyers in there would be helpful. That is a great time also to talk to the families about the importance of the census and how really easy it is. I did it myself. It took about 10 minutes online. I didn't try it on my phone, but I did do it on the computer, and it was super, super easy. So that's another way to help engage the parents and let them know. If we had a family-friendly flyer, doing pickup kits, this would also be a great way to spread the message. You're exactly right. You guys are kind of our front-facing folks with this. So looking for some more questions. Lots of thank yous and great information.
And Amanda, somebody mentioned a flyer. I will send you, for the school districts that we have been working with in Eastern Kentucky to give out those We Count storybooks at their meal pickup sites. I will send you the flyer that we created. The only part that wouldn't quote make sense for folks to use without the storybook, there's a little piece in the corner that talks about the storybook. But I'd be happy to, we could always replace that with something else if people don't want to have to create their own flyer and are looking for just something that all they have to do is print out.
So it looks like Anna Shepherd out in Floyd County she, I know, is very closely connected with the school district and a lot of the early childhood programming that's there. She's asking for a list of counties who, the Eastern Kentucky counties that you guys printed those activity books off for, so that she can see kind of if Floyd County's on there, and so they can start putting a plan together to get those activity books out. And Anna, what I'll do is I will we'll connect separately about that, so that we can kind of talk through what you're looking to do. Okay, so I think one of the other things that I really wanted to say is early on during the presentation, Amy talked a lot about the trusted voices, and the 3 examples that she provided were the child care providers, FRISCs, and librarians. And when you're talking about community early childhood councils, that is what we're here to do, is to have all of those folks at the table so this information can get out throughout the community. So, as you're thinking through how to do some closeout work, we've been talking about those parent kits that are going to be released hopefully very, very soon. That's going to be another great way to get in touch with those parents to talk about the census and that sort of stuff. So again, Amy, thank you so much for sharing this information. We'll be continuing this conversation through obviously the end of October. And we would ask that if you, as you're getting more updates from the census, feel free to reach out and let us know how best we can help and how we can get more information into the communities. With a lot of the information, a lot of folks that I'm seeing talking over here in the chat box, I don't think any of us would hesitate to help in whatever way we can. So we also, it looks like Christy works at the Cooperative Extension, and several of our offices are doing weekly pickup kits. One second, for families. So if there's any way we can help, happy to do so. So again, it looks like a lot of folks here are very excited about this information. It looks like we have one last question and then we're going to finish up. Any information on when we will have information about applications will be ready? Okay, that's for the CECC stuff. Applications will be ready. So Tina, yes, we're still looking to get that done this week. I know the videos are kind of in the final touches of the production. It's really kind of dependent upon when those videos can be released, and that is we're still looking for this week. We're looking by the end of the month, so we're really hoping to get that stuff out. I did have one last question for Amy before we get off here. So as some of our CECCs talk to parents and families about the importance of the census, there will inevitably be more questions that pop up. So if you are doing that and you are getting a lot of questions, go ahead and send those questions to me, and I will talk with Amy to get those answers out to you as quick as we possibly can.
Yeah, thank you, Amanda. Like I said, there's so much more information I could have shared, and so what I'll really think, I'll go ahead and send Amanda some stuff that is quick and easy to shoot your way, but I'll also, really put some thought into whether there's kind of a summary document about, again, all of those kind of myths and misconceptions. Maybe there's a summary document I could create. Yeah. So yeah, you all are a great resource. I can't thank you enough for giving me the opportunity to speak with you all today. I really look forward to working with you. It's exciting that this is, just the beginning of the conversation. Thanks, Amanda.
Thank you so much, Amy. We really, really appreciate your taking the time out for us today. So we are starting to run a little bit short on time. We're right at 11 o'clock. Just as a reminder, the next webinar will be May 27th. So about 4 weeks from today. I'm trying to work with some folks on exactly what that's going to look like, but I'm hoping that we're going to be able to talk about changes to childcare with the with all of the changes that have been happening with the COVID-19 crisis and all of that. Still trying to put those pieces together, but that's really what I'm hoping to do. And as soon as we get that, of course, we'll send it out to everybody for that reminder. And thank you guys so much for joining us for another webinar. We will send out, as soon as this video renders, we'll send out the video to everybody that's on here and all of the CECCs and fiscal agents. And again, just thanks so much for your time. We look forward to talking to you next month.